Fish are friends, not food.
I'm a little worried about Rob.
Yes, it's happening.
Ever since we tried to summon Cthulhu, he hasn't been the same.
I'm growing gills. Gills! My transformation into a deep one has finally begun.
Rob, we don't see any gills.
It's these kids getting involved in all this stuff causes them to go crazy.
I think I feel the webbing starting to grow between my fingers.
Welcome to Dinner and a Board Game, a new actual play show about friends, good food, and lots of fun at the gaming table. We're your hosts, Megan and Heath. Each night, I'll invite the gaming group over to my house to cook dinner, sample drinks, and play a board game on one of our customized board game boards. Dinner and a Board Game is an actual play show where you'll be able to watch the game from start to finish, with gameplay dashboards and graphics that help track the turns and allow everyone to follow the game's action. We'll play games like Zombicide, Black Plague, Descent, Journeys in the Dark, Small World, Unearthed, and Terraforming Mars. We'll even be joined by special guests such as Lou Anders, J.F. Lewis, and cosmic horror artist David LaRocca. The show is free to watch on YouTube. Just come by my channel, Heath Robinson, and be sure to subscribe. Click Watch Now to start the first episode and join us for fun-filled evenings of Dinner and a Board Game. And now it's time for Table Talk, where we'll be talking about the creative and business side of making things in the tabletop and fantasy genre. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone. I'm Heath, and welcome to tonight's episode of Table Talk, our 9th episode. And in this show, we talk about both the creative and business side of trying to make things happen, whether it's in TV, film, board games, novels, comic books, whatever it is. We talk about making it happen from both the creative and business perspectives. And tonight, I am extremely excited to have our special guest tonight. This is Kamran Pasha, and you may know him as a writer and producer out in Hollywood. If you look up his IMDb, he has all kinds of credits to his name: Sleeper Cell, Kings, Nikita, Roswell, New Mexico. He is known for all kinds of things, but you may also know him especially here on YouTube as a YouTube personality. He's on the channels like Midnight's Edge, the Latino Slant. I was watching him with Polly last night. Deprogrammed with Carrie Smith. He makes the rounds on all kinds of different YouTube channels. He is all over the place, where he has earned a reputation as kind of a Hollywood prognosticator, where he offers inside information about what's happening inside Hollywood and what we're expecting to come. And so when I was thinking about, how do I introduce someone like Kamran? First of all, you probably already do know him from YouTube, but because of all of his, Hollywood prognostication, I was thinking then Seer of Seers came to my mind. And I was thinking, well, Phil from Groundhog Day. But you can't just have Phil from Groundhog Day. With his YouTube notoriety, I also think of Simon Cowell. So I think, he's all over the place. So I think if you take Phil the Groundhog and Simon Cowell, you end up with Kamran Pasha. How about that? Oh, did we lose him? Well, I'm going to take him back down. I hope that is on. I hope that's not on my end. Let's see. Well, he may be coming back on in just a moment. Everyone hold. I see that he's frozen on my end. Oh, and he can't get out. So I bet he's going to be coming right back. But Kamran is, I think, an incredibly special person, because he not only talks about the inside information about Hollywood, but he is also extremely generous with his time as far as providing information to people who are interested in getting into the Hollywood industry. As a writer or as a producer. excuse me, as a writer or a producer, he has had a lot of information. He provides a lot of information in his own time, and he's incredibly generous with that. Oh, here, let's see if we got him again. Oh, Cameron, we got you on a different camera now.
My apologies. I warned you my computer might freeze and it froze again, and so I'm going to do this from my phone as long as I can, and then I'll switch back to the computer if I need to. So we're gonna have some adventures with your audience today.
All right. Well, no problem at all. Okay. So, First of all, actually, we should have you introduce yourselves. That was my introduction. But do you want to tell our audience?
I heard most of it.
Do you want to tell our audience who you are and what you are doing from both the creative and business side of making things happening? Of course, you're in TV and film, but predominantly TV.
Yeah, for TV, film, predominant TV. I'm also a novelist, and I've actually written a video game, a very successful video game, 50 Cent Blood on the Sand. It's the only game I've written. I'm not much of a gamer myself, but that game was actually quite successful. And so yeah, that's my background. I've been working in Hollywood for 21 years. I was formerly a journalist and then a lawyer, and I wrote my first screenplay when I was in graduate school. I got a JD MBA, so I was in a business school accounting class, and I was kind of bored. I didn't really understand what was going on, and I wrote my very first horror screenplay just to pass the time in that class, and that ended up getting me my first agent and launched my career. And I moved to LA from New York in 2001, and here we are, 2022. I'm still doing it.
Okay, so I did talk about how well known you are on YouTube on a whole bunch of different channels, and so I'm very happy and very pleased that you agreed to do this show. But why are you so involved in YouTube? Like, why are you doing this?
Well, it's a very good question, and actually, nobody really has asked me that in the past, right? In fact, some people have said, "Well, is this guy really a working screenwriter, or is that just talk?" Because I don't see any working screenwriters doing that, and they are right. Because I don't know of any of my colleagues who are actually working screenwriters who's that's their primary profession, as it is mine, who are actually on YouTube or have Patreons or anything like that. There may be, I don't know who they are. Maybe they'll show up as a guest every now and then on someone's thing, but it's pretty uncommon. And I've been doing this pretty actively for about almost 2 years now. It started off I was just like a fan like everybody else. And I wanted to talk about, I was very unhappy with where Star Wars was going with The Last Jedi and things like that. And I had found a lot of YouTube channels just as a fan thinking, well, am I crazy or does that movie not work? And then I saw all these young up and coming YouTube channels in the aftermath of TLJ that started talking about their dissatisfaction with where Lucasfilm was taking that, the franchise. And so I became like a viewer of these things. And then over time I said, a lot of people don't exactly know what's happening in this town, and I kind of do. And I have some inside information. And so I started, people eventually began to realize when I'd be in the comments in the YouTube that I think this guy might actually be like a real screenwriter. And so some of these creators started figuring that out, that this dude is commenting on their YouTube channels might actually have something of value to them. And they reached out to me and I started getting interviewed. And then people said, wow, this guy's got some insights, actual practical insights from the industry that we haven't really heard from a lot of commentators or observers, right? In fact, most are. And most aren't functioning in the industry. Many of them are not in Los Angeles. They don't know how it works. And so I started getting a bit of popularity in that. And during the heights of the pandemic, it was also a great way for me to still have human contact with people when sort of the whole world was shut down. And so I've been doing that for a while, but there's a broader reason. There is a broader reason that I do this, which even now, other colleagues of mine who are professional screenwriters didn't like The Last Jedi. They weren't happy with Star Wars. They watched some of these channels, but they never thought of actually participating. They still don't, right? And I think the reason is that there is, frankly, a lot of snobbery in the industry. The idea that we've somehow made it to a certain level, like a Mount Olympus that other people cannot touch, and that creates a sense of distance from the audience and from the people that we're making films and television for, and a belief that it's kind of degrading to reach out and connect with normal people. Well, I'm a normal person. I'm a normie like everyone else. I'm a fan. I've talked to YouTubers who have an incredible depth of knowledge of certain features, certain movies and franchises and genres that's beyond my knowledge as a professional. And so I'm just a normie like everybody else. And I've talked about, and I can talk about a bit today on the course of our conversation. I've been working there over 2 decades, and I'm still a bit of an outsider in the industry. I'm a working professional. I'm working with some major studios right now on a pretty big project. And so it's not just like, I'm a guy who sold a script 15 years ago and hasn't done anything, although some people kind of think of that, like he must be that guy for him to be on YouTube. But no, I'm working professional today. My primary income that pays my rent is screenwriting with actual major production companies and studios. But I'm still a bit of an outsider because of my philosophical outlook, my ethnic background, my cultural thing, my religious beliefs, my political beliefs. So I'm always sort of the odd man out in the industry. And that allows me in some ways to be with everyone in the fandom who often feel like the odd man, odd women out, and to feel like the industry isn't listening to them. So it allows me to have that sort of equal connection with people. And that's why I can come onto wonderful channels like yours and talk as equals, as fellow fans about the system.
Well, I think that you provided a lot of hope to a lot of people. I know you provided hope to me, but also people that I hear from who want to be part of the industry and want to tell stories and have those kinds of ideas they want to bring out to the world.
Yeah.
I think seeing you on YouTube and hearing you talk has provided a tremendous amount of hope to those people.
Well, that means a lot to me. It is actually very meaningful to me because often you wonder, what's the point of this whole journey? I've been doing this like 2 decades. I've had a few really good successes and lots of failures, right? Lots of stuff that didn't go right. And yet you're like, okay, well, I'm sort of stuck in this. There's no way out but through. So I'm going to keep doing this. But is it making any difference? And I'm glad that at least this aspect of my life seems to be making a difference to people. So it's very meaningful to hear that. So thank you so much.
I think it absolutely is. It is over here. I can vouch for that. So we talk about both the creative and business side of things, and you seem to be on the verge of doing what I think a lot of people in my audience and who I talk to personally, like a lot of friends of mine, are most want to have. Because as I've been listening to you on some other YouTube channels, you were saying that you are on the verge of pitching the shows and trying to get those made that are the shows that you most want to do and the stories that you most want to tell.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I am at that stage right now. And as you know, I do consulting as well. And often some of the most practical consulting I give to young people who are aspiring filmmakers is how to pitch their projects, right? What are the, I just did a call with a consulting client today, and he went over log lines with me, and I was like, yeah, those don't work. Let me help you break them down and come up with log lines that do work. And we got to that because pitching is often the hardest part. In some ways it's harder for people than actually creating a script.
So I don't think this is anything that is secret information because I heard you talking about other YouTube channels that you're talking about. The shows that you're pitching involve Moorish, Spain, and then also the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah. I mean, those are all finished projects, and each of those, the Moorish Spain project sold to a large studio, Ottoman Empire project sold to a large studio. So these are projects that were they were screenplays, or they were television pilots that were finished that I wrote on spec, that I essentially, the word spec, we're just writing them speculatively. No one's paying us to do it. We're speculating and hoping that someone will buy it. In these cases, they did. And so, yeah, but part of the process is also I've got other projects where, you've got the script, but before they want to read the script or even to entice them to read the script, you often have to take a meeting where you just have to explain what you got. Well, pitch it out to me. What's the log line? What's this about? Why should I even spend a couple hours of my time reading your material, right? So often those are sort of the introductory meetings that you have with new producers on a new project, and you have to be able to pitch them. In my career, there are many successful screenwriters, often the ones really at the top of the system, who they don't have to write a spec script. They don't have to come up with an idea for a movie or a television show and just write it and hope someone will read it and buy it. And someone like a J.J. Abrams will just walk into a studio and say, I've got this one sentence idea. And then they'll get, at least in the past, they would give him a lot of money. I think maybe he's lost some of his cachet in the last few years, but in the past, he could just walk in with one sentence and be given, here's $100 million, go make that movie. Here's $50 million, go make that TV show, right? For me, I found that because I'm still, after all these decades, still not part of that inner club, I still have to prove myself every time. So I don't like to pitch. I don't like to pitch without having the underlying material. So what I mean by underlying material is that I generally tend to write scripts. I tend to write entire movie scripts, entire television pilots that are ready to go. And then the pitch is about enticing the person to read it. Because often they'll be like, oh, you got a project in Moorish Spain? How's that going to work? Why would anyone watch that? Even if you give your one sentence pitch or a few sentence pitches them, and they're like, well, now that I've at least intrigued you with the archetypal idea, here's the script. And then you can see how it works. And so that's what I do.
So with these that are your ideal project, if in the ideal situation, what is your role in them? You're the writer of them. So you're going to write the script, obviously, right? would you also be the producer and showrunner?
Yeah. So in television, writers are the producers, right? In television, writers are the producers. It's a different hierarchical structure. The titles have different meaning in television movies. So writers tend, the creators of the show and the writers of the pilot, they tend to get this title executive producer, which is the top of the pyramid.
We're having a lot of
Hollywood
interference.
television. Yeah, hold on. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to attempt, while we're talking, I know I'm getting interference on your end as well. So let me see if I can log back on through my computer. I hope I can, because we're just having a lot of technical difficulties today. But let me see if I can get it done. So I'm going to try here. If I do come on, I'm going to sign off from this angle. So I hope your audience can be just patient.
Okay, no problem. Yeah. We'll hang. We'll hang. See if we can move back over to the computer. Okay, I'm gonna move you down here and move that one back up.
Okay, hold on. So let me see if I can. Now I actually have to shut that off so that it doesn't interfere. Okay, can you hear me properly now?
I can hear you properly now. Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully we won't freeze. If we freeze again, my apologies to your audience. I've had some computer problems today because I've been actually spending the last 2 days rewriting my pilot that I'm working on, and because I had to get it in today to the studio, and so my computer's probably a little overheated because I've just been cranking for 2 days on the end, right? So it maybe needs to shut down for a few hours, but it hasn't been able to. So I'm here, and I don't know how much you could hear through the interference, but
we were just saying that in the ideal situation, you are writing these TV shows. You're obviously the writer. Are you also going to be the producer or showrunner on these in the ideal situation? Okay.
So this is how it works in television. It's a different hierarchical structure than feature films. And the titles have different meaning. So in television, writers still have a lot of power. So the creator of the script, the writer of the pilot, even if they're not always the showrunner, and sometimes they won't be, and I'll explain why, they usually tend to get an executive producer credit, which in Hollywood tends to be, in television, is the top of the pinnacle of producer credits, right? The executive producers are the big bosses of the system, right? In movies, it's different. In movies, when you see credits of a feature film in the theater, you'll see producers' names and executive producers' names. And the people that have the power are the producers, not the executive producers. The producers are the ones that actually win the Oscar, right? So when there's a limited number of people that are allowed to take the Oscar statue at home for Best Picture, and that comes out of the producers of the film. The executive producers tend to be people that provided some important service in getting the movie made, such as they helped secure the financing, they brought in the star, they had some other angle that got the movie made, they had the rights to the underlying project, whatever it was, but they're not day-to-day involved in running it, right? And so the EP title is less meaningful in movies, but in television, the executive producer is in charge. And in television, those tend to be the writers. It's shifting, unfortunately, a little bit in the last few years, where directors are beginning to become the showrunners on projects, which I don't think generally works out if the director is not a screenwriter. But especially on in places like Disney, where I've worked at Disney in the past, that's kind of their system. And it's their system now in Disney Plus, where the directors have the power and the writers are work for hire, which is not as common and I don't think works better. And I don't think it helps in television. I think in television it's better for writers to be in charge because they have to map out the entire season. They have to map out a long-term plan, which most directors can't do unless they're already professional writers. And most directors are not professional writers. They might wish to be and resent the fact they're not, but they are not. But yeah, so in my shows, certainly at the journey that I've been on, I've, like I said, 2 decades of it. So I'm at a place where I can negotiate and leverage, the executive producer title. Earlier on in my career, they would have said, well, you wrote the pilot, we'll give you a co-EP title, which is a secondary level. And we're going to put like a real EP, someone who's had many more years of experience than you on top of you to essentially manage the process. But I've reached a stage where I can credibly claim, to get the showrunner status because I've done this for a few decades now. And unfortunately, there was a bit of a period in the last few years where Hollywood was actually giving showrunner power to very young, inexperienced writers. It was the flip of what I grew up with. I grew up with, you have to struggle for years before they give you the showrunner status. But in the last few years, there was a lot of people that were being, for ideological purposes, they were the right sex, they were the right gender, they were the right, ethnic thing that was needed for PR purposes. And so they would be, in the past, those people would often be given the title, but not the power. In the cases I've worked on a few shows where young people who served political purposes for the PR purposes of the show were actually given the role of showrunner, and they didn't have yet the experience to run it. So it's like trying to fly a 747 where you have never even gotten in a Cessna, and it can lead to disaster. And those were disastrous experiences. So we're now shifting back towards long-term successful people like myself becoming the showrunners of projects.
Okay. Well, that, like I said, that sounds like the ideal situation for so many people that I know personally, who are all trying to build worlds and build IP and love fantasy and this kind of thing. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the creative side of things, and then we'll go to the business side of things in the beginning.
And we shall talk about our archetypal conversation about the nature of evil. I don't want to ignore that.
No, that's where we're going. That's where we're going. Let's go into evil, because I've been addressing this topic on my channel, and I think you were going to have a really interesting perspective on this. First, I was going to say though that I've noticed that I think that Christian, Jewish, and Muslim, I'll call it mythology for the purposes of this conversation here, have not often been the subject of fantasy. Oh, did we lose Kamran again? We may have lost him again. Christian, Muslim, Jewish, like I said, I was going to say mythology. I'm going to take him down and then see if he comes back. And then I'm going to try to add him back. This
is going to happen
a
little bit. We're going to have a little bit of these jumps, so apologies to your audience, but I will keep coming back. So yes.
No, okay.
So you were beginning to talk about something, and then I was gone.
Okay. I was saying that I've noticed in general that Christian, Jewish, and Muslim, I'll say mythology, just as a general catch-all term, isn't often used.
Meaningful storytelling. It doesn't mean it's not true. It's just a meaningful kind of storytelling. Yes.
Everyone can put their own truth value on that.
Correct.
That group of stories hasn't been used as much for storytelling as I think it could. And I'm very interested in actually one of the worlds I want to develop in Christian mythology.
Yep.
It's not a Christian story, but it draws upon Christian mythology.
So some of the archetypes and legends within the Christian community.
Right. And legend. Right. Yes. Why do you think that is?
Well, historically, it was the opposite. It is correct what you're saying today. Historically, the industry began, even in the silent films, doing Bible movies. I mean, Cecil B. DeMille, who's really my archetypal filmmaker that I'd like to be like, right? Cecil DeMille did the 10 Commandments in like the 1920s as a silent film, and it was even, the version that we're all familiar with Charlton Heston was and still remains an incredible movie with incredible special effects that are rival today, right? They still hold up, like the splitting the Red Sea, but people don't realize that's the second version of it. Cecil DeMille did a silent film version of that with also incredible special effects of the splitting of the Red Sea. We're like, how's he doing this in 1920, right? And so early on, filmmakers very quickly, Hollywood figured out that this is the best well to tap into, is these incredible biblical stories that millions, hundreds of millions of people worldwide believe in and have a meaningful connection to. And when I say biblical stories, these are, like I said, they're shared stories within the Abrahamic tradition. The Quran has the Moses story, the Joseph story, the Jesus story. There's sometimes different from the biblical version, but the overlap is very large, right? The same characters are there and the stories are largely similar. So I watch the 10 Commandments and I get it as a Muslim, right? I get it it's my favorite film, and I get it. And I'm not joking when I say that. That is my number one film of all time. And we can talk about that when we talk about the nature of evil that explores. But so they did that for decades because they understood there's a market for it. And there's a very large market for it. And these archetypal stories persist for thousands of years for a reason. They seem to touch the human heart. And that's why, religion, I think, is ultimately about effective storytelling. And these stories have moved people. They've created civilizations. They've given people hope. They've inspired people to fight. All these things. It's all part of the human condition. But in the last maybe 10, 15 years, which has been sort of the downfall of old Hollywood, the corruption of Hollywood, everything that began in 2010, this last decade has been a lot of disrespect for all those old traditions, because we have a new cast of characters that are coming in, deconstructing everything because they think they're smarter than all the foolish people of the past. And we saw that on The Last Jedi. We were deconstructing the brilliance, the archetypal religious storytelling of George Lucas and disrespecting it, in my opinion, right? And so that's part of the thing. And so you've had biblical movies in the last few years, but Ridley Scott, brilliant filmmaker, but he's not a religious man. He will say, I'm an atheist. So he does, a Moses movie, right? And it's most believers would not
connect with that movie in the way that we connected with the Cecil DeMille movie, because Cecil DeMille movie is it believes that there's a God and believes in the miracles and doesn't try to rationalize away the experiences that Moses is having, and because that's the story is meaningful to us in its miraculousness. But then you have Hollywood deconstructing it. So you're doing these things like Noah's Ark and all these other things Aronofsky does, which attempt to deconstruct the story, give it a new spin on it, take away the divine, take away the magic and the miracles, and replace them with alleged science, right, of how things happened. And people didn't watch those movies. They didn't succeed because they don't touch you on any level. And that's, again, the disconnect that Hollywood in recent years has had out of ideological contempt for all the ancient traditions and ancient forms of storytelling. And that's not sustainable. So I've actually written biblical movies. One of my epics, I've written several, and one of my favorite epics that I've written is on the story of Joseph, the patriarch Joseph in the Bible, who is the grandson, who's the son of Jacob, and grandson of Isaac and great grandson of Abraham, and he gets sold to slavery in Egypt and become all these incredible adventures he has there, and goes to prison there, and all of this happens. That story is a very powerful story. I did my senior thesis in college on that. I studied religion in college, and my senior thesis was on how the Joseph story functions in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, because it's the only story in the Quran that's a linearly told story. The Quran is not a linear book in many ways like the Bible is. The Bible is a history book starting with Genesis, going through the Hebrew Bible, and then for Christians going on into the New Testament, right? It's a linear. The Quran, every chapter, surah, flips around. You'll have a story about Moses, then you'll jump to the Day of Judgment, you'll go back to Abraham, then you jump to something up in the prophet's life. The only story that isn't like that is the story of Joseph, which takes up an entire chapter, the 12th chapter of the Quran, and in the Quran is called the greatest of stories. Like, this is God's favorite story. And so I've written a screenplay about Joseph, which is purely biblical epic with magic and angels and miracles and all these things, right? And I've struggled to get it made for years, and I still intend to make it someday because it's from my heart. But Hollywood, in the recent generation, Hollywood has resisted that, even though that is what the audience wants. And now they're slowly beginning to return to giving the audience what it wants because they need money. We're going to see a return to biblical storytelling. It's coming within the next decade, and hopefully I'll be one of the people that participates in that. So I don't know if I've lost you, Heath. So I'm not sure if I'm doing the show by myself. I will go see what is happening. See if I'm the only one doing the show. But I'm happy if that's the case. Then I'm going to try to at least go and check what's going on in the chat. Maybe connect with some people in the chat until we figure out what's going on here. Okay, so it looks like it's me, and I don't know where Heath is. So I'm going to look at the chat here. So I apologize. I think we have a friend commenter. I'll read in the chat until Heath comes back. Commenter, you wrote, Abrahamic faiths are excellent material for storytelling. Some of the best secular stories have religious symbols and themes in them. I absolutely agree. These religions, now the Abrahamic religions dominate the planet. They are about, 30%, maybe 40% of the planet by now. And so that's no, actually it's more than that. I think combining Christianity and Islam together, we're talking about 50% of the planet, right? And so you got the comment saying, for many Muslims watching, I recommend reading Surah Yusuf, which is the whole chapter telling Joseph's story, very neat. In fact, I would recommend everyone read that because I think you'll see the beautiful similarities with the biblical version, and then see how the story in some ways differs and why that the story has a slightly different angle in Islam. And we got my good friend Wintrell, who I've talked to several times, and he's a member of my Patreon. He's in the thing. So guys, I've lost my host, so I don't know what's going on here. It's not my channel. But if you want to throw me some questions in the chat, I'm not in charge here, so I don't know how to make this work. Could you throw me some questions or stuff in the chat, and maybe we can keep going, because I'm not sure what to do. All right, news regarding. Oh, okay. I see. He says my power is out, and he had mentioned that he was having some power issues. So we're both having very silly obstacles here. I've been out several times, but all right. But Heath, until you can come back, just lost power and internet here. Until you can come back, I'm going to keep doing this. I don't know what else to do. I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm in the movie Speed, where I'm running this bus and I don't know what's going on. So I'll look at the comments until you can able to come back. So Wintrell said, news regarding your writings and shows. Well, there's not a lot, Wintrell, that I can talk about yet. A lot of it is confidential still. I have been open about the fact, by God's grace, I have sold a major project to a major studio and to a major network, which I actually just handed in the latest draft of the pilot. I had sold an original pilot that I wrote that I mentioned earlier in this broadcast, that I tend to write pilots and then try to sell them, right? And so this was a written script, and then we sold it to a studio last year, and then, or actually a year before that, during the pandemic, so things were very slow. And then we were able to put out into the marketplace again next year, and actually, by God's grace, we got a major network. And so now, a year later, I'm now working with the network on its notes, because now it's like, all right, we love this pilot, we need to change it to work according to the needs of our channel. And so that they gave me their notes. For the last 6 weeks, I've been reworking the pilot to address those notes. And so, if those of you are wondering out what the process of something like that works, I handed in an outline to the studio and to the network, saying, this is how I think I can rework the pilot that you bought, according to the needs that you've expressed and the storytelling needs that you want. And they quickly said, that's exactly what we want. Go write it, which is a blessing, because normally you spend weeks on the outline stage, but they pretty much said, this is what we want. And so I went with it. And then I spent the last 6 weeks working on the actual script, the new script of this pilot, and going back and forth. And so we're at the stage right now where, because there's a studio involved, and the studio is the company that finances the project, and then the network is what distributes it. So the network is the one that is given the notes, and we have to adjust to what the network wants. So I've been working first with the studio to hone the script to what the studio believes is the way the network wants to do it. They're different companies. They're not part of the same conglomerate. So there's a little bit of guesswork involved. We have their notes, and they're all like, well, this is, I think, what they want. But we want to get it right before we take it to them. So I've now done multiple drafts of that with, okay, here's adjust that, go back and fix that, and make sure there's more of this in there. So just before I came onto this channel, I put in my latest draft, and I just received emails from the studio saying, thanks very much, we're going to pass it along internally to our bosses. And my hope is, because it's not 6 weeks, I'm like, I would love to get it to the network, because that's the only way the project moves forward. Is now we give the new script to the network, and then hopefully they say, this is really in line with what we want. Maybe they'll give some notes, maybe they'll say, let's just move forward with it. So we'll see. So that's how that process works. So I'm going to take a look at some of the more questions here. We've got commoner. You mentioned Cecil B's 10 Commandments. Have you seen The Message, 1975? I liked it a lot. Reminded me of Cecil. Yes, I have. For those who don't know, The Message, it's got other titles. It's the Messenger of God, whatever. But I think The Message is the primary title that you can get out of the West. Was a movie done in the 70s, with Anthony Quinn. And it's the only movie ever done, Hollywood English language epic movie made with a Hollywood crew, ever done about the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as we Muslims say, is an honorific. And so that's never been done. We've had Moses movies, we've had quite a few Jesus movies. We've never had a movie about the Prophet. And one of the problems is that most Muslims do not believe showing the Prophet is appropriate, because he didn't like idolatry. He wasn't into imagery, and he certainly didn't want images of himself. He didn't want people focusing on him, and he didn't want to be the center of this religion. The Islam is focused on God, not on the Prophet Muhammad. And so he didn't want to be iconized in any way. And so even in Islamic art, you'll often show the Prophet, covered with a veil, like you don't see his face and features. And that's like a taboo that's very deep in the system. So how do you make a movie about him if you can't show him? And so this was a movie made by Mustafa Akkad, who is famous for, he was the producer of Halloween. Right, so you've got this guy who created Michael Myers and brought the Halloween franchise to the world, who also then does this incredibly important religious epic. He was a Syrian-American filmmaker, very pioneer. Like in the 70s, a guy from Damascus comes and goes to film school here and then makes Halloween, and then goes, I want to make this epic. I want to do something for my religious community. No one's ever made a movie about the Prophet. Like we have these great movies like Cecil DeMille's 10 Commandments. And so he then came up with a brilliant solution to the iconography problem, which is that he made the whole movie the Prophet's point of view. The camera is the Prophet, so you can't ever see him because you're looking through his eyes. So the entire movie is the Prophet watching things and seeing things. And so how do you make that movie work is that you have the other characters speaking to the camera and saying aloud what needs to be said for the scene. So they're saying, oh Prophet of God, oh Muhammad, I know you're thinking this. I know this is what's troubling you right now. I know you're debating how to handle the situation. Here's what I think. So all the characters are talking and saying aloud the prophet's thoughts and interacting with the camera. And it was starred actually Anthony Quinn, who played the prophet's uncle Hamza, who's a very important figure in Islam. And so you got Anthony Quinn, major figure, Zorba the Greek, and he played this character. And it was really, and it remains to this day, 40 plus years later, 45 years later, remains an incredible movie. It's up there, as Kamran said, with Cecil DeMille's Ten Commandments. Even you're not Muslim, you can watch it and you go, this is a great movie. This is an epic film that makes me understand. It's like a 3-hour movie, how Islam arose, right? And so people have been trying to do something like that, and no one's been able to, in 45 years, top that. There's been a couple of like animated movies in the Islamic world that follow the similar thing where you don't see the prophet, but none of them have had the impact of that movie. So I've actually written an epic movie. I'll show it to you here while I'm still waiting for Heath to come back. One of my 2 novels is Mother the Believers. It's a novel on the birth of Islam from the point of view of the prophet's wife, Aisha, right? It's a nice little 600-page novel. And I also have a screenplay of that. And so, I've written that thing. Will I ever get to make that screenplay? God willing, inshallah, as we say Muslims. I mean, I'm trying to make all this stuff. I'm trying to make my Joseph project. I'm trying to do all of these things, right? And if hopefully this project I'm currently working on gets on screen, God willing, is successful, then that will give me hopefully the cachet and the leverage to do some of those projects. So I'm going to keep looking through these chats until Heath can return. He's saying the neighbors have power and I do not. Would you want to close out? That is no problem. Can we reschedule for another night? I'm happy to do that. It's your channel. I don't know. I just try to answer a few more questions here, and I'm happy to reschedule for this. So I'm just going to take a moment to see if there's a couple more chats, and then I can sign out within 10 minutes, which is about the time they were expecting to go. Bonzo Kilborn asks, hey, Kamran, will you be back with DC anytime soon? I think you're meaning Doomcock. I've enjoyed my time on Doomcock. I don't know that I'll be coming back again. I think his channel is going its own direction, doing its own kind of commentary, and I'm sure to have my own perspective on things. So I'm a little more selective now about where I'm appearing. I think Midnight Zetch I've come out a little bit. I'm enjoying channels like Heat's. I like talking to some of the newer channels and giving them a boost up. So I think that's going to be the path I'm going to continue to follow. We got more questions here. It looks like Warner Brothers will need fresh people. Are your people talking to them? Well, we're always talking to everybody. And I've worked with Warner Brothers multiple times in the past. I've sold pilots to Warner Brothers, so I have relationships there. Ventrell's asking, please expand the DC issue. Ezra Miller is now being targeted the last couple of days. Will the Flash survive? I think Mr. Miller will eventually be removed from the Flash, just like Amber Heard, I believe, will not be in the final version of Aquaman 2. It's just very complicated. For monetary reasons, they've spent a few $100 million on a movie that's already shot, so they have to reshoot the whole damn movie, and that's complicated. I think there's political problems with Mr. Miller. I think he probably has some kind of leverage over people that this town works on blackmail. I think Ms. Heard also had the same situation, and so I think there's political situations of, if we fire this guy, is he gonna unleash the dogs of war and put out some embarrassing information that we don't want out? So that seems to be an issue there. And I'm just saying, any new actresses in Hollywood are you watching and recommend? The ladies, look, they're I actually think a great actress that we should all be watching, who I think is a superb actress and this keeps rising, is Florence Pugh. She's done a lot of stuff, and she plays Black Widow's adopted younger sister or fake younger sister, and I think she's a superb actress. I think she's doing a movie with Olivia Wilde. I don't think that movie itself is going to be great, but I'm sure Florence will, as always, be a good performer in it. And is there anything else that we can talk about here? So I don't know, Heath. She's going to be in Dune, right? I think I've heard that Florence Pugh is going to be in Dune. She's a very talented actress, and I think I hope she continues to play this role of this of the Russian assassin and all that. I think she's good in it. All right, so guys, look, Keith, I think I will sign off now. I think it's just been, we've survived a lot of things. My computer kept having problems. You're having problems. This is an important channel. I want more people to subscribe to it. I want more people to watch, and so I'd love to come back and do what we wanted to do, which is talk more about archetypal storytelling. We started hinting on it about the nature of evil. And I think that segues into our talk of biblical stories and Abrahamic stories. so I think I'm going to sign off now. To those that are still there, my apologies to you that we had all these these electronics problems. This is the strangest situation I've been in, Heath, and I thank you for your graciousness in letting me essentially commandeer your channel while you don't have power. So it's kind of bizarre, but you were very gracious about it. So I'm going to sign off, everyone. I will throw in, before I do, let me just throw in a link to my Patreon, because why not? And that's, Heath is on my Patreon. He's given some really wonderful commentary on it, and that's really the best way to connect with me. Wintrell's a subscriber to my Patreon, and I try to put a lot of Hollywood information, insider information, and stuff that I don't think a lot of people see. We talked at the beginning of this broadcast is that there aren't really any other screenwriters that I know of who are working screenwriters who are doing YouTube or Patreon or any of this other stuff. And so on my Patreon, I try to be as stuff that I can't say publicly that might cause me legal ramifications or career ramifications if I name names and things like that. I'm more willing to do that on the Patreon because it's private server and I know who's on and who's watching, and and I can. It's just for people that are willing to subscribe and listen to me. But it's become a lively thing of its own. We've got now several Disney employees who are Patreon members who are feeding me inside information that I did not expect. They'll send me memos and they'll tell me about meetings, or Bob Chapek said this. I'm like, wow, so this is stuff that people don't know, and my own Patreon members are Disney employees who witness to it. So that's the kind of information you can get. I also do a lot of screenwriting tutorials and writing tutorials on the Patreon, which seem to have helped people. Several people have actually consulted with me. You can do consulting with me on the Patreon, and I've actually a couple dozen of people have consulted with me, but several of them have actually, to my delight, they've rewritten the scripts based on the consultation they had with me, where I said, look, you need to work this, you need to fix this. They did it, and two of them so far have won screenwriting awards. These were normies like everybody else trying to become screenwriters. They had scripts that didn't quite work. They consulted with me. They paid me for my services. I gave them very professional advice that I would give to a fellow screenwriter, how to fix a script. They did the work. They submitted it to festivals, and they won. And I was delighted to hear that. That's so far two of my consulting clients have won, major awards, and I'm so delighted at that. So if you want to come join me on Patreon, you can learn about consulting on there too. So Heath, I'm going to sign off now. I'm sorry for all the weird stuff that happened today, but maybe everything happens for a reason, and hopefully in the next few days we can reschedule and do this. And it looks like my friend Kamal Mariati just came on board as I'm about to leave. Kamal Mariati is a wonderful actor and a really good-hearted person. And so I'm sorry, Kamal. I'm about to sign off because I lost my host whose power went out. So, if people don't know Kamal, check out his IMDb. He's a very successful actor. He's been a working actor for a long time, and he's very talented. And I'm proud to consider him a friend. And I'm proud to see him continue to work in this town where, people of Arab origin, Muslim origin as actors, it's hard for all of us who are not in the mainstream of this industry. And for actors, it's even more difficult, I think, because they don't always have control of the material they're given. But he's always made some really interesting roles that I think are worthy. So with all that said, my friends, I'm going to sign off now, and we're going to reschedule this when our host Heath is able to get the power situation sorted out. So many blessings to all of you. Heath, thank you for having me on your channel. Let's just call this the prologue to our upcoming episode that's happening. All right. God bless everyone. We'll talk soon. Take care.